Masaka is waking. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Masks, which is episode 17 of season 7 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation one episode at a time. In this video I cover the 7th season episode of Masks. So Masks is the episode in which the Enterprise encounters a comet that starts to take over the ship. They find out that the comet is in fact an ancient alien archive from over 89 million years ago. It starts to take over the Enterprise by changing the ship into different matter, more specifically ancient artifacts from its own culture and mythology. And this includes taking over the body of Data, who begins to exhibit different personalities. In fact, he's taken over by thousands of personalities, although we only see 3 on screen. And the ship is at risk of being turned into a different thing entirely, and they lose the ability to fly. So Picard must unravel the how this mythology works in order to get the archive to stop transforming the ship. He eventually discovers he needs to talk to the figure of Masaka, who he gets to come out in the form of inhabiting Data wearing a mask. And he eventually discovers his own mask to wear in order to impersonate a figure named Gorgano, and is able to talk Masaka down, which stops the archive and returns the entire ship to normal. So, this is an infamous episode, infamous for being terrible. In fact, this book I was reading earlier in another review quoted many of the writers, including the author or the editors of the book and writers of the show TNG, saying that this was one of the worst episodes of the season. They cited this episode and Force of Nature as being the 2 worst episodes of the season that many fans equate to Spock's Brain. However, that book is broken because it didn't mention Sub Rosa. In fact, it mentioned Sub Rosa was a good episode when clearly Sub Rosa is the most hated episode of the season, let alone the show, let alone the season. But I'm not here to relitigate Sub Rosa. I'm here to talk about Masks, which I always liked. I always liked this episode. I never had an issue with it. In fact, when I was younger, I used to put this in my top 50 favorite episodes of TNG. Not so sure it would make my top 50 nowadays. Oh, no, sorry. Let me correct myself. Top 50 favorite episodes of Star Trek. Not just TNG, although granted, at that time it was before Deep Space Nine and Voyager were finished, so there was less Star Trek around, but still, I was in my top 50. I wouldn't put it in my top 50 of TNG, let alone all of Star Trek at this stage, but I still like it. I still don't think it's nearly as bad as everyone claims it to be. I think it is kind of bland. Like there's not much to it. But I don't know. What I like about it is mostly production value. Like I love the set design, the art department of all of that when the ship is being turned into into a forest or a jungle or whatever. I think they did a really good job, and all of the artifacts with the weird symbols, like it's really that's mainly what gets me. That's what really gets me invested and really interested in the world. And the special effects with the comet, like, that was a cool shot. The special effects artists talked about how impressed they were with it, that they actually showed it on screen a lot longer than they intended to because they were so pleased with it. I thought that was cool. The different masks that, like, Picard was wearing at the end and stuff like that, like, that was cool. Like, and also, like, the music was good. I believe they used this music or something similar to it in Voyager whenever they have focus on Chakotay's Native American heritage. They have similar music to this, but it was going for a really heavy sort of flute-based, more of like wood flutes. It's supposed to sound very like tribal, to go along with, this ancient culture. And yeah, I thought the music was good. I think the acting is good, particularly Brent Spiner. This is probably where I part ways with most people who think that he comes off as silly and ridiculous in this episode. I actually think he does a really good job at it. And, I think this episode's also very effectively creepy. As I said, I think it's more effective in tone than it is in the story. Because as I said, the story is pretty straightforward. This weird device is taking over the ship and turning it into, an ancient jungle. And so Picard just needs to impersonate a member of the mythology and talk to Data, and then problem solved. So not much of a plot. But the tone that it sets, like as I said, and the setting and everything it's very effectively creepy. Like the moment where Geordi is in engineering examining Data. This happens so much in the show where they think something might be wrong with Data, so Geordi goes to engineering and hooks him up to something. Like they do that so many times in the show. But anyway, as he's doing that, Data is like starting to freak out a little bit, and he turns to Geordi at one stage and is like, Geordi, what does it feel like when one is losing one's mind? Like, that's creepy. That was really creepy the way Data said that, and Geordi just being like, alright, you're starting to scare me. And, he goes over and is like, no, you're okay, Data, I'm with you. And he's like, okay. And he says it like the way, like, a little child would. So, it's like he's already starting to be taken over by the personality. And that was it was creepy. And then when he was taken over by the different personalities, seeing like the Ehab guy going, I am Ehab, and acting all arrogant, like that was cool. Like I think that was really good acting. And I know people are going to disagree with that, thing is cheesy. I think you have to go with the conceit of the episode. Like, if you watch in the vacuum, you see Brent Spiner going around saying, I am not Ehab, I am not Masaka, or whatever. Like, it would come off as silly, but if you go with the concept, you go with the conceit of the episode that there's this ancient technology with this mythology that's taking over the ship, it's actually really good. It actually really fits in the way, like, when he sees Troy enter engineering, and he like kneels down and he's like Masaka, and then he switches to a different personality and goes, I am yours. Like that is really creepy. Like it's such a good, like really intense like tone that they established. And then later when Picard is like talking to him and he's like being the scared young boy who like grabs Picard's wrist, but he has the strength of an android. And the way that Patrick Stewart plays this is like so good, because you can tell like that Data is like using his android strength to crush his wrist, and he's like, oh, please let me go. And you can tell he's like in extreme pain, and I'm like, and you have to have that knowledge that this is an android with, the strength of 10 men that's grabbing his wrist. And since it's not actually Data, it's a different personality, like a scared little boy, he wouldn't be showing the normal restraint that Data would be showing, and maybe he's using like more strength than he should. So So yeah, that was really cool, and the whole thing with Picard having to negotiate, learn the mythology. Here's what I like about the episode most of all, and it seems like this was the original intention of the episode, is to actually use Picard's knowledge of archaeology and really like apply it, and take advantage of it. And it's funny because archaeology is not something that really normally comes up in the life of a Starfleet starship captain, and so there's sometimes they have to try to sort of hand-fist it in to the episode. I'm trying to think of the episodes where it actually becomes really relevant. I thought there was a third one, but all I can think of right now is The Chase. And then this one. I thought there was a third one, but it's escaping me at the moment. But no, it's definitely this one and The Chase. Oh, I know, Gambit. That's right, because they were looking for artifacts. And that was the third one. But this is the most, like, Gambit was really straightforward. A bunch of pirates stealing artifacts to create Raiders of the Lost Ark type of powerful technology kind of thing. That was more of a hokey sort of mystical way to use it. And The Chase was to an extent too, because that was finding. That wasn't really that much about. Well, it's kind of about more of anthropology than it was archaeology, but still, it was still this ancient map, and they had to discover this ancient hidden computer program and DNA. So both of them were those were more like mystical, like fantasy based, and this was also fantasy based because it's about a ancient archive turning the Enterprise into a jungle or whatever and turning stuff into artifacts. But the way that Picard applied his knowledge of archaeology was more about mythology. Is more. This is, I think, out of the 3 episodes, this is the one where we actually. Well, no, he does it a bit in Gambit too, but that in a sort of more straightforward way. Oh, do you see this symbol here? This means this. So he was also using his knowledge of archaeology, but in this one, I think it's more. I don't know. I think it's more relevant to the plot. It was relevant there because he discovered how to defeat the evil weapon, which actually kind of sucked. But here, he's like delving deep into an unknown civilization and sort of uncoding it based off of his knowledge of other civilizations and discovering what exactly these figures mean, and they don't have much information to go on, so he's just taking. And it is interesting, a lot of the episode is like Picard just going around looking at the different artifacts that are being created by this thing and sort of uncoding and try to unlock. And it's funny when Worf speaks, it's like you can tell they play him as an amateur because, oh, that looks like antlers, maybe it's an animal. And Picard is polite, doesn't tell him that's stupid, but it is stupid. It's like, no, it's like there's no dumb ideas, but he realizes that that's the moon, and it's like the sun and the moon, and he's able to use that knowledge to speak to, Data, who's being inhabited by the persona of Masaka, and he's able to cosplay as Gorgano and use his deductive reasoning skills and his archaeology knowledge and knowledge of civilization, so more of his anthropology knowledge as well, to deduce how this mythology that he knows nothing about, how it might function, and he guesses pretty much correctly and saves the ship. So I also kind of like that. I kind of like that they actually showed the use of his archaeology, and he's able to put it to good use. Now, getting back to Brent Spiner and his performance, so it's interesting to note that if you might have noticed, this episode comes out right after Thine Own Self, which is also a data-centric episode, and apparently they handed Brent Spiner the script to this episode the day before filming, and he had just finished filming Thine Own Self the day before, and he was up till midnight the day before, and he had one day off, and they handed him the script and say you have one day to learn it, and tomorrow you start shooting. And he was complaining. He talked about how he's like, said, if I had 6 months to study these characters, I could have done something great. I could have created and invented all these characters. But he said because he was, flung from one episode to the next, that he just acted on the spot and sort of just came up with whatever he came up with. I personally think it works. Like, I buy it. Like, I think he does a good job with the EHAP character and being like, and acting all mischievous and silly. I think that's one of the best performances, I think, from Brent Spiner. And the performance of the little child was convincing, and the performance of the old man I thought was really good. Oh, soldier, to stay warm. Like, that was really convincing. The one area that might have been maybe a little cheesy is the Masaka, because he's just trying to be like, intimidating and evil, and the voice that he puts on, I think, kind of blows it a little bit, because he's like, go away! Like, I think maybe he should have had more time for that. Like, the other ones, I think, worked, regardless of how unprepared he was. But that one, yeah, you should have given him a little bit more time to work on that one. Maybe that one would have been better. But that being said, I didn't think it totally sucked. But, that is the only one I think it needed a little bit of work. But yeah, because it's usually, because he had 2 centric episodes in a row. He went straight from Thine Own Self, which was heavily data-centered. And so Brent Spiner had a lot of work to do and a lot of filming. He went straight from that to another episode where he has a lot of work to do, and it was really unfair. And unfortunately, he complained, but they didn't have any other scripts written, and because of the way that TV filming works, and they had time is money, and they had to go, they couldn't wait, and that's the only script they had to film, so they had to film it. and so they had to be like, sorry, Brent, you just have to do your best, just go with it, and which I think is unfair to him. I mean, they should have planned it better. They should have done a fucking Geordie episode in between. Like what was the episode before Thine Own Self? I think it was Lower Decks or something. They should have done Lower Decks. Should have done Thine Own Self first, then Lower Decks. Like, plan it out. Say, we're going to plan to make sure that this script is ready first, that we're going to make sure that Thine Own Self is ready first, and then we're going to have Lower Decks ready, then we're going to do Masks. Because Data was barely in Lower Decks. Like, give him a whole episode off to prepare for Masks. But yeah, they kind of screwed him with that, and they should have. I think that was the problem with the scheduling, with the script writing. Like, they should have planned. I know sometimes it's organic and you don't prepare, and maybe that script was just more long and that's the best they could do, and maybe they would have had to rush Thine Own Self in order to have it ready for before Lower Decks. But still, they should have planned it better. That's just it. It was, yeah. But that being said, I still think Brent Spiner, despite having no time to prepare, still did a pretty damn good job. I think it's even more impressive knowing that he had no time to prepare for it. And, I mean, that's mainly what I like about the episode. The acting was good, the tone was good, the special effects, the music, the art design was great. Like, it's just the visuals are great. Like, the props, the different artifacts were really, like, beautiful and really, like, enhance it, and you believe it's an actual society or from artifacts from ancient civilization, and if the mythology feels rich. So all these, like, details make it an interesting watch for me, even though, and plus seeing Picard use his archaeology skill to its strength. And yeah, you got that one scene where there's snakes in the torpedo. It's like snakes in the plane, but snakes in the torpedo. That was kind of silly, but whatever. I mean, they were probably overdoing the horror tone a bit with that one, but it's still, it was an intense tone to see how, like, the Enterprise was changing into a jungle and there was nothing they can do about it. Like, that's unique. That was cool. And I gotta call out Star Trek Lower Decks, if you haven't seen it. There's an episode in the first season called Moist Vessel, which does a similar thing. It wasn't the same thing. It wasn't this same archaeology thing. It was a different thing. It was like a terraforming ship or something. But it portrayed the Cerritos getting turned into like a jungle or something. And that, because it's animated, they were able to do a lot more with it. They had like this whole like river and ocean, and they were able to do more with it, looking more like, you know, a jungle or a rainforest or whatnot, which was cool that they use animation to this way. They do more than an episode like this with a limited budget, with that, where it's way more expensive to do the kind of things that you can just draw. So they did take advantage of that. And it's also a good concept, too. That was one of my favorite episodes of Season 1 of Lower Decks, because I think that is an interesting concept of having the ship turn into a jungle or whatever. But also, speaking of Lower Decks, they did a direct call-out to Masks, where they had this gag at this in the teaser of an episode where Captain Freeman was taken over by the Mask. That it was supposed to be the same species. It was the same ancient civilization, but instead of Masaka, it was like Manuka or something. It's like, oh, I am the spirit of Manuka. And Mariner was just like, stop putting on masks. Nice little gag for Lower Decks to make fun of. And again, this episode's kind of infamous for being bad, but yeah, I beg to differ. I don't think it's that bad. I don't know. I guess people just find they probably find that go away and the thing with, oh, I'm Gorgano and Picard putting on masks. They find it silly. But I think if you go with the conceit of the episode, it makes sense. It requires suspension of disbelief, but Star Trek always does. So anyway, I would now like to thank all those that support me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. This helped me continue with the channel. I'm very much, very thankful for everyone who supports me. I want to give a big special thanks to Brandon Neil Howells, Antarius, and Jordan Johnson. Thank you so much for your very strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro Migalacio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, Allison Fordyce. Thank you so much for your support. So we do have a few patron comments on this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, masks more like tasks, because this episode feels like a chore. Anyway, this wasn't what I thought. I assumed it was the episode of Voyager where mad scientists splits B'Elanna in two and cuts off a guy's face, Texas Chainsaw Massacre style. I'm disappointed it's not that episode. It should be that one. I like that one. Do I like this one? I don't know. I don't remember it. Mark, tell me right now, do I or do I not like this episode? Yes, you do. You love this episode. You think it's just as amazing as Endgame. So the episode you're thinking of when B'Elanna is split in two is called Faces. So I see the similarity, faces, masks. I can see how you get them confused. I think I like this episode better, but again, I'm sure I'm in the minority on that. Anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, when I was younger, I really liked this episode. Watching it today, I can't understand why. Brent Spiner can certainly act, but we had a couple of episodes by now where he plays multiple characters, and in addition to that, the characters he played were mostly very uninteresting. The array was powerful beyond belief, and the whole concept of an array transforming ships in order to teach them about their culture was stupid and didn't make any sense, especially when the ships are most likely destroyed in the process. I can't believe that a culture capable of constructing this array only has a mythology as simple as this one depicted in the episode. By the way, maybe someone should tell Troy that the moon can certainly be seen in daylight. The best moment was the scene with Data participating in a children's art course. My rating is 4 out of 10. I was thinking the same thing when Troy mentioned, because you can only see one sun and moon at a time. I'm like, wait, you can see them both during the day. You can see this moon during the day, but whatever. It's funny because when you were saying that the concept of a ancient civilization array that can turn the ship into terraform it into their own culture, I was thinking, to myself, I was like, it's awesome, but you said was stupid. Okay, well, to each their own. Like, I do get what you're saying, like, why would this do it? It doesn't really make any sense, but I think it's not really functioning the way it's supposed to. That's the impression I got. And I think that's why, because normally they wouldn't know that there would be an artificial life form to take over like Data, so it's weird that it just happened to be that way. So I think since this is from like millions of years ago, that it's just interacting strangely with 24th century technology, because that wasn't even conceived of, not even close, when this thing was created, especially Starfleet. This is from an alien culture. And plus, I think it's unfair to say that an advanced alien race wouldn't be this primitive, because they would have a history, they would have a mythology, they would have an ancient civilization. I always understood that this civilization, or the mythology that Picard encounters in this episode, was it's like if the humanity created an array, a station to transmit ancient Greek mythology, or Norse mythology, but let's say Greek mythology, and if they wanted to make sure that it lived on, that it survived, that people understood the ins and outs of Greek mythology, but it's discovered by aliens millions of years in the future, and so the technology that we created interacts with this alien technology in a weird way, and ends up taking over the ship and turning everything into Greek mythology. So in other words, I don't think that the aliens, when they were at the height of their technology, really interacted or behaved the way that these mythological figures are behaving in this episode. It is just like a museum of their ancient history, their ancient mythology, if that makes any sense. Like, I think like all these artifacts that were being created is not the kind of things that would be in the age of technology that the ship was created, if that makes any sense. The more I think about it, the symbols, the kind of signs and symbols that are used in this episode, particularly the one of Masaka, kind of reminds me of the episode of TOS for The World is Hollow, and I've touched the sky, where it had that ancient like supercomputer that had, it kind of looked like had similar symbols. I don't know. Anyway, tangent over. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says Joe Manasky was walking towards the writer's room and had to come up with a new script for the upcoming episode. He had no idea what he was going to write about. Then suddenly he saw a mask and a brick on a table. So he decided to write this terrible episode and write the teleplay about a brick and a train. Oh, we'll get to that. Much worse than this episode, by the way. When Picard and Data reappear on the Enterprise, they are in a corridor. Should they really be in a room? 2 episodes a time, it's the crew who starts to play Transformers. So my rating is 3. Brent Spiner acting is good for most of the people he played, and yes, the episode makes absolutely no sense. Out of 10. Stephen Kennedy follows up with, this episode would have worked better on lower decks. I mean, they kind of did. Moist vessel, kind of similar. And it worked better. They were able to do more because it's animated and they don't have to worry about budget as far as the ship turning into, jungle or whatever. And then Stephen Kennedy has another comment. I will have a special review for Shadowplay. Ooh, I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, so here's the thing. So not to sort of shadow your, and I know you were just coming up with the scenario about Joe Manasky, but to actually answer that seriously, I did read how the script was written or the process with Joe Manasky, and apparently he was living in the Alps in France, I believe, and I think he was for a lot of Voyager as well, and did most of his work remotely. But in this case, he just sent in the script and apparently had no hand in. Usually the writers in there with the writer's room and the writing staff, even if it's a guest writer and they're breaking it all down together. But in this case, he wasn't there. He just wrote the script, sent it in, and it needed refining because they said it was too complicated and didn't make much sense, and they had to simplify it, and they wish that Joe Manasky would have been there to help them simplify it. They think it would have been better because he would have understood more of how to simplify the script and what to focus on. They had to do the best that they could. Nareen Shankar was the one who wrote the teleplay and added some elements to it. But all in all, I think this was pretty good for a Joe Manasky script, in my humble little opinion. So I think there's nothing wrong with Picard and Data being in a corridor, because they were in a corridor when the thing got turned into a temple at first. So I didn't get the impression they necessarily walked into a room. I think it makes sense that they're still in the corridor, but what I did notice is that Data was lying on the ground, and then the thing transformed back to the Enterprise, and then all of a sudden he was standing. And well, that didn't make sense to me. Like, the thing transforming back from the temple to the Enterprise shouldn't have changed Data from lying to standing. Like, he should still be lying down. But, I don't know. That's just what I thought. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who said, I adore this episode. I have to turn my brain off and the nagging little voice in my head that says, but this doesn't make sense. And just remember that I love mythology, and that's enough for me. I'm not sure what amuses me more, the symbols on the terminal, which remind me of the 1995 flying Windows screensaver. Yeah, it did, it did remind me of that. Or Picard holding the stone statue in a very phallic manner and telling Riker that the statue is a find of enormous significance. 7 snakes in a torpedo out of 10. Yeah, I didn't notice that. That phallic thing. I'll have to look out for that one next time. Thank you, someone else who also likes this episode. But no, I'm not surprised that a lot of people are negative on it. Anyway, next comment is from Greg Marley, who says, I know from the TNG subreddit that there are plenty of people who like this episode, but I'm in the at least equally as large camp of people who do not like this episode at all. I would actually say that's a bigger camp. From my experience, I think the camp that doesn't like this episode is much bigger, but that's just my take on it. But anyway, partly for the story and partly for Brent Spiner's out-of-control hamminess. I've read that Spiner got the script literally the night before the first day's shooting and had to do the best he could. But to me, the dirty little secret is that Brent Spiner is at his best when his natural inclination to hamminess and a loud, big, happy, extrovert acting style is hemmed in and curtailed. Well, I don't know about that. He was pretty good in Independence Day. The role of Data traditionally did this before the enshittification that is the emotion chip. As Data, he could only use subtly and understatement to convey understanding and feeling, and through the limited premise, he succeeded in somehow creating an android character that in time tugged at the heartstrings. Off topic, I just watched Night Terrors again, and goddamn, that is a great episode. From the first moment, it has a cool musical string, signaling creepiness and the feeling of eeriness and maintaining throughout. So many great lines and perfect deliveries and good acting from almost everyone throughout. I think now it may be in my top 5 of season 4. Everyone go watch it again. Well, I'm going to say something you're going to really, really heavily disagree with, and that is I think I like this episode better than Night Terrors, but only slightly. I think they're both similar in the case of they both are effective at having a really creepy tone. They both have great music. They both had that sense of eeriness and suspense. I don't know, some of the stuff with Guinan, where you're pulling out a phaser rifle and shooting in the air, that ruins it for me. I don't know, it's just kind of cheesy and some of the other stuff. Although it has that one scene where Deanna's talking Worf down from killing himself, that's a fucking good scene. It's a really good performance. So maybe I like it just as much as this episode. Maybe they're on par. And if I do like this one better, it's only slightly. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't call it one of the best of season 4. But that is just my humble opinion on that one. And as I said, I get why Brent Spiner's performance would be off-putting for some people. But I think if you go with the conceit of this episode, I think it works, personally. Anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, I've always liked this episode. To me, this is a very effective, creepy episode that's done right. And I have to say that Brent Spiner did a damn good job in this role. And generally, I'm not a fan of ham acting, but in this case, it works real well. I also like the interactions between Captain Picard and Data and the other personas that he talks to. To me, this is always a good watch and not a bad episode, as most people say. So my rating is 7 out of 10. You know, I think that's what makes Brent Spiner's acting so good, and the scenes written so well. The ones where Picard is talking to the different personas that's inhabiting Data. Because as a viewer, I forget that it's just Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner in the room, because I get caught up. I don't see Data. I see Ehab. I see the old man. I see the young child. And I'm able to look past it. And I think, to me, that's what proves that Brent Spiner does a good job of selling this. Because I'm able to, and maybe some other people aren't, and maybe that's why he thinks he does a bad job. But for me, I forget that it's just Brent Spiner. I forget that it's just Data. That I see all the different characters. And with Picard, and I'm willing to go with it. So anyway, final comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, when I first saw this episode, I was intrigued by the unique concept, but something was always getting in the way from me enjoying it. I guess it was when I rewatched A Fistful of Datas years ago, I realized and sighed. Brent Spiner is unfortunately more a hack at some multiple roles he plays than good, and this is especially noticeable in the 2 episodes where he plays many roles. 3, Masaka is waiting out of 10. I think it's Masaka's waking, but I don't know, I could be wrong about that one, but it doesn't matter. I agree with you about Fistful of Datas. I think Data's performance there is hammy. So I think it has more to do with the writing and how much I'm willing to go with it. Because with Fistful of Datas, it was just a silly, oh, look, isn't it funny, Data's being all these Western characters? And I didn't think it was funny, and I wasn't that interested in it. So I just see Brent Spiner doing stupid ham acting, which is, oh, my paw's gonna get you, and it just comes off as dumb. Like, that's ham acting. Whereas here, when you see him acting like Ehab, I am not Musaka, like, I'm into it. Like, I'm invested in it. I'm drawn in, and therefore it doesn't come off as nearly as bad or hammy or cheesy to me. But that's just me. I'm just caught up by the tone because the art department's so good, the special effects are so good, the acting's so good, the music's so good, it draws me in. Anyway, I don't love this episode as much as it might sound that I do. I just feel like I need to defend it because everyone else hates it. Anyway, so thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Masks out of 10 is going to be a 7. Very good. Yeah, a 7. I don't think it's an amazing episode. As I said, there's really not much to it. There's no greater theme. The plot is pretty simple. But the production value is just really good. I actually think Brent Spiner's acting works because it creates a really good tone. Like, the tone throughout the episode is very eerie, very crazy. Like that one scene where Data says, what does it feel like to lose one's mind? It's like, that really gets me. That is like creepy as hell. And I think the rest of the episode, I think, to me, when I think of season 7, I think it does a lot of this creepy, like, eerie stuff very well. Like this Genesis coming up soon would be another example. Phantasms earlier in the season, and yeah, I think there's a few other episodes. Dark Page, like, I think they do this creepiness like really good in season 7, or at least I do personally. And yeah, I don't find Brent Spiner's performance that hammy. Like, I actually kind of like it, and I like that they did Picard, like, had him use his archaeology to great effect, and to be actually very good at it, and is able to unravel this mystery by using the archaeology. So that was a good use of Picard. But yeah, it's not much to this episode, so not I couldn't give it more than a 7, but I do think it's good enough, despite everyone hating it, to give it a 7. So that is it for my review of Masks. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor, leave a like, leave a comment, stuff like that really helps out the channel. And if you really would like to support the channel, up to you, no pressure. Just in case you want to, there's a link in the description below for my Patreon page. You can support me on Patreon. There's different tiers for different budget, different rewards, such as a Patreon only series I do where I cover revisit reviews that I made years ago and give my updated opinions on them. And also you can leave comments that I'll read on my episode reviews like I just did. And there's pre-releases where I release episodes 2 weeks in advance, and there's you can request an episode for me to do, stuff like that, those kinds of things. So if you're so inclined, you can check that out. So let's see what's coming up next on my channel. Let's see, Monday will be my review for Shadowplay. Wednesday will be my review for Eye of the Beholder. And Thursday will be my review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5 as a whole, so talking about all of Season 5. And then on Saturday, close to the end of the year, so I'll be doing my traditional top 10 shows of 2024, where I talk about my 10 favorite shows of the year. This year I have not seen that many shows, so it might just be 10. So I might just arrange the 10 shows that I've seen in order. I didn't watch that many shows. The number of great shows has gone down back from 2016, which I think was the peak of good television. But anywho, yeah, that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time, and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.